rules here, and I want to say before we get started, some of our questions tonight are very pointed. Please don't send me a note later that says you all were mean to X, Y, or Z. Okay? Because if these individuals up here can't hold up under the questioning that we have for them, they're going to be eaten alive in Washington, D.C. So, we're not trying to be mean to anybody. We're trying to get at what? The truth and the facts here tonight. So, the questions are from our media representatives here on the panel, and I'm going to introduce them first. We've got Anthony Austin from CBS 19. Anthony, wave at them. Anthony is a reporter and an anchor. Then we have Mr. Taylor Hemness. Taylor is also an anchor with KLTV. Then we have Mr. Point of View himself, Neil Barton from KPTK. And I'm going to join them with some questions. We also have Dardine Radel from Hideaway Lake. Dardine is the timekeeper. And candidates, when you see Ms. Radel hold up that paddle and you see the yellow, that means you have 30 seconds to circle the airport one more time and land the plane. Then if you see the red, that means you can finish a sentence but not a paragraph. We're pretty funny about, holding to time here tonight. So we're not going to let you go on. And I've seen you all several times in debates, and I know that you all really, really play by the rules. Okay, so we are going to have an opening statement from the candidates. Those will be 1 minute. Then, as far as the timing of the questions are concerned, if a question is for a specific candidate, that candidate has 2 minutes to answer the question. And we've done this because I believe that if a question is going to a specific candidate, that means there's something we're trying to get at on a particular topic. So that candidate will have 2 minutes. If the question is for all of the candidates, they will have 1 minute to answer. At the end, they will have 2 minutes to close. That 2 minute close can be a rebuttal. That 2 minutes can be something, they can raise an issue that they believe is important for you to know about that wasn't addressed here tonight. However, if they take a shot at another candidate, then the person they're taking a shot at gets 30 seconds to rebut. So, and we don't want to play ping pong all night with that, but we will let it go on until it gets to be sandbox. And if it gets to be sandbox, which is beneath the United States Center, then we'll probably call time on it. So now, I think everybody knows the rules now. I'm going to take a seat, and we're going to get started with the opening statements, and we'll start with Miss Leela tonight.
Good evening. Almost. There we go. Good evening. My name is Leela Pittenger, and I thank all of you for coming out tonight. I've been in this race longer than any other candidate. For 28 months now, I have crisscrossed the state. In fact, in the last 3 weeks, I've put 3,000 miles on my car because I believe in what needs to happen in the Senate and for the state of Texas. I'm in this race, as you can see, the only woman in the race. And that's very important because out of 100 U.S. senators, we have one conservative woman. She's also the only woman in the Senate who's considered undoubtedly pro-life, and I think she needs some company. We need some conservative Christian women in Washington, D.C. to tell the bureaucracy, get your mitts off my kid, get your hands out of my wallet, get your bureaucrat out of my health care, and get your state out of my church. Very plain about it, and we can do it with love and respect, but this is a fight that is not just about our country, it is about our state, it's about our sovereignty in our person and in our family. I'm in this because I believe that needs to go to Washington, D.C. I love that the Republican Party is the color of red, especially Republican women. That's the color of blood, and the Republican women in this state are the lifeblood of the Republican Party, and we need some blood transfusion in Washington, D.C.
Well, thank you. My name is Tom Leppert. It's a pleasure to be with you again. I've had a chance to visit with Grassroots a number of different times, and clearly been at Tyler an awful lot of times during this campaign. And I'm fortunate to have some terrific people, some of the folks in this audience and some folks that aren't. People like David Dykes, who leads Green Acres Church, and people like Glenn Stone in Longview over at Moberly. that have jumped on and understand how important this campaign is and stood behind me because they know who I am. You know, for a long time, what we've done in Washington is we've sent career politicians, people that want to be career politicians. And the question's real simple. What have we gotten out of that? What I give you is someone that's not a career politician, somebody that's been involved in business, actually been out there, led businesses, signed both sides of the paycheck, make the payroll. That's what we need. People who will put real solutions on the table, and they're going to be leaders and not politicians. Thanks for having me.
Good afternoon, I'm Craig James, and kind of a homecoming for me. I was born in Jacksonville. I lived in Alto, and we drove up the road so that we could find a doctor who could deliver me. It was fun for me this afternoon. I was in Alto, I stopped by the homestead, and we put out yard signs, and I can't even imagine what my dad, if he were alive, would think about that with my grandparents. Last night, there was a very major occurrence in politics. Deb Fisher in Nebraska, major upset, stunning victory in the primary. This morning I woke up and have answered calls all day today about being Craig James is the Deb Fisher of Texas. I was on MSNBC this morning. I totally identify with Deb. I think here through the night you'll understand why I am considered the Deb Fisher of Texas. That's a good thing. I don't have the money these guys do, not the guy that's leading out there, but we have a great, strong presence in the grassroots around the state of Texas. I believe in this state. I love our country. I look forward to visiting with you here this evening. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jim Bognett. I'm representing Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst. Hi, I'm Jim Bognett. I'm representing Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst. Thank you so much for having us here today. David Dewhurst is the only veteran in this race. He's a proud veteran. He's raised his hand and served to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. He's the only real conservative in this race. He's worked with Governor Perry to cut taxes and cut spending over the last 12 years. He shares Governor Perry's record. We're in a house of worship. He's a proud Christian. He believes Jesus Christ is his Lord and Savior. He's devoted to the Constitution. He's fought for not only the First Amendment, but the Second and 10th Amendment as well. There's a reason that he is being supported by Mike Huckabee, all the pro-life leaders across the state of Texas, and also by Governor Rick Perry. And that's because he has fought for our Republican conservative values over the last 13 years. They're voting for him. We hope you will too. Thank you.
It's great to be with so many friends here in Tyler. I'm Ted Cruz. Thank you for coming out tonight. Our nation's at a crossroads. Barack Obama is the most radical president this country's ever seen. And we're going broke. And it's been career politicians in both parties that have gotten us where we are today. All over the country in 2010 and again in 2012, voters are saying enough with the tired establishment incumbent politicians that don't believe a darn thing. In my view, this race presents a simple, clear choice between a timid career politician and a strong conservative fighter. We have seen conservatives across the state uniting behind this campaign. Tea Party leaders, Republican women, conservative leaders, the grassroots. I ask for your help, and together we will ensure that Texas leads the fight to stop the Obama agenda, to defend free market principles, and to restore the Constitution. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Glenn Addison, a small businessman here with my wife of almost 29 years, Lori, 51 years old, worked for myself most of my life. And although I'm not sick and I'm not tired, I will tell you that I am sick and tired of career politicians and elitist establishment insiders running the show. Tonight I hope to talk about three things that I want to restore. The concept of a citizen legislator who will work for we the people for 6 years and come back to his day job, who won't take all the lavish benefits. Somebody who will work to restore the Constitution of the United States, because on these 2 pages, Article 1, Section 8, there's a whole bunch of words missing, such as environment, education, energy, and so on and so forth. I also would like to work diligently to restore our national sovereignty. You see, I believe that that beast that we call the United Nations is all about destroying the United States. So my position can be summed up in 2 sentences. The UN, I believe, needs to get out of the U.S., and the U.S., I believe, needs to get out of the UN. And I hope to talk about those tonight, and I'm going to be with you. Thank you.
Okay, Our first question is for all the candidates, and it's on the issue of healthcare reform. Under the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as healthcare reform or part of Obamacare, the whole nation will be impacted by the new law. Texas will be one of those states who will receive a major impact in the health system since it is heavily populated. What are your thoughts about healthcare reform and the issues it could cause in our state, and what is your solution? Ms. Pittenger.
I believe that the Patient Act, Affordable Care Act, is like they like to call it. I think it's completely unconstitutional, and I think it does need to be repealed, every bit of it. But it's not just because of the mandate, it's because it makes the Independent Payment and Advisory Board more powerful than elected legislators. That is a serious problem. I don't think it's the first time the government's mandated us to do anything, but the only way healthcare will improve in this country is if people have freedom of choice in healthcare. Whenever the government is in charge of anything, you lose choice. They eliminate your opportunities to pursue other avenues if you want to do something different with your health or your land or any number of issues. We need total healthcare freedom. We need to let the free market operate. We need to let people be able to buy insurance across state lines. Each state, if it wants to, needs to be able to do tort reform, but that shouldn't be forced on us by the federal government either. It should be each individual state making these decisions. Now, I know the state of Texas has had to stand against the federal government more than once on how we spend our healthcare dollars. And quite frankly, I think we need our state legislators, especially our governor, to look at them quite squarely in the eye and tell them, no way, not in my state.
Obamacare needs to be repealed, and if elected, I will work very aggressively to that end. We need to understand that mandates are not appropriate, they are unconstitutional, but we also have to understand that we simply can't afford this, and all indications are that this isn't a couple of $100 billion, this is going to be trillions. That's where most politicians stop, and unfortunately that's where the Republicans were. They didn't put a solution, they didn't put an alternative. We've gone beyond simply saying repeal Obamacare, because I ran businesses, 5 different industries, small and medium all the way to large. I understand the challenges and the issues out there for individuals and for companies. We have laid out a very comprehensive program that all of a sudden puts competition into the game, that relies on the private sector, that takes the patient and the doctor, puts them at the core of the economic decision, and ensures that you have a competitive system, which we simply don't have today. We need to repeal Obamacare, but we also have to have people that are willing to put solutions on the table so that we drive the agenda, unlike what we saw, we're not back on our heels.
And I believe a lot of that is through the competition. Yes, we have to get rid of Obamacare. 2 things I always ask myself about a question. What does the Constitution say about it, and how could free markets come into play? We need to empower the patient. We need to get it to where the patient understands what the game is. Our auto, our life insurance, we understand that situation clearly. I'm all for health savings accounts. Those aren't just for the rich folks. Those are for people who can go out and save and account for themselves. That's empowering the patient. This is not a country where we are going to have to take care of everyone out there. I believe personal responsibility becomes a very key part of what we're talking about. Yes, I believe in medical tort reform. Do I think that a doctor has to be responsible if they were to sew us up and leave something inside? Absolutely. But we have got to get to a point to where the costs are coming down medically, and that only can come down if competition is introduced into the situation. If my wife and I are out looking for medical insurance, we need to be able to have a whole platform of things that we can look at, and those choices are what's going to drive down competition.
Governor Dewhurst believes that Obamacare is the worst law ever passed in the history of the United States. He thinks that not only should we repeal it, we should take the bill, we should burn it, we should bury it in the ground and then pour concrete over it. It is something that is killing businesses across America. It's freezing them. They can't make decisions because of this massive cost of health care. Here's the thing. Liberals always think that more government is the solution to all of our problems. That if we just had more government, that's how we would fix things. Conservatives don't believe that. They believe the way to fix health care is to bring market forces in, to align the incentives between the patients and the providers. That's what Governor Dewhurst has fought for with Governor Perry in Austin. Governor Dewhurst and Governor Perry passed free market health care reform, and that's what Governor Dewhurst will fight for in Washington, to repeal Obamacare and replace it with conservative free market health care solutions.
You know, every Republican running for office in Texas says he or she wants to repeal Obamacare. And we've all been burned by politicians that give a good speech on the stump and they go to Washington and they become spineless jellyfish. There is going to be enormous, enormous pressure in 2013 to compromise on this issue. Cut the baby in half to keep some of Obamacare in place to get rid of some of Obamacare. The question each of you has to ask is you've got to look a candidate in the eyes and see if he has the steel to stand and fight. The first bill I intend to introduce in the U.S. Senate is a bill to repeal every syllable of every word of Obamacare. And I'm going to lead the fight to get it done. Obamacare is terrible policy. Every place that government has taken over health care, it has driven down quality, it has promoted scarcity, it has put bureaucrats between doctors and their patients, and it was arrogantly jammed down the throats of the American people, and we need to repeal every word.
I agree, of course, that we need to repeal it because the bottom line is, as I say all across the state, it's not in the book. And there's enough paper in that bill to print about 900 constitutions. If we would focus on the Constitution versus the government getting our business, we'd be a lot better off. And so the government's got no business in our health care. These are states' rights, according to Article 1, Section 8. We've got to get people in Washington that think to themselves, okay, we've got smart people back home in our home states that can solve these problems. And if they don't, then we, the people, can vote them out. There's a number of state reps and state senators that are being challenged because we, the people, are not too pleased with it. That's the way it should be. These powers belong to the states, and then our state reps and state senators should suffer the consequences if they get away from the book and mess up how they regulate our lives on anything, whether it's health care, energy, agriculture, you name it. We've got to get back to the book. This business of reforming, how's that working out for us? Look at what is happening in our nation's capital. We've got to have somebody like a small businessman who knows how to tackle problems without the help of all these bureaucrats.
Good evening to you. The next question tonight's on education. And Mr. James, I'd like to start with you, and then we'll continue to your right and on back on around. My wife is in education. I have several members of my family that are in education. It's important to my family and important to a lot of families across Texas. I'm starting with you because you're one of the candidates who has listed dismantling the Department of Education as a platform for your campaign. How much money will that really save taxpayers to do away with the Department of Education? And on top of that, is it more important to use that money to reform public education or to make it more possible for families to send their kids to college?
Well, for everyone here, take a moment and rent the movie. It's a documentary, Waiting for Superman. And it points out strongly that the amount of money being spent on the kids is not the problem. That's not the issue. We have a broken system because we're expecting every kid to go to college. We've got to abandon that. And by getting rid of the Department of Education and leaving the money in local school district officials' hands to educate their kids, we win for the kids. It's morally the right thing to do, but also economically. We've got to introduce life skills development in high schools. The massive dropout rates are 25%, 50% in the inner cities. We're kicking these kids to the street because we're expecting them to go to college. Life skills, bricklayers, electricians, plumbers are admirable and needed. Not everyone wants to be a banker or a lawyer. So if we do that, we are preparing these boys and girls as 18-year-olds to come out and be personally responsible and helping our economy to grow with the manufacturing jobs. Good paying jobs. That's how it works.
Education is a very important issue. My mom's a teacher. Governor Dewhurst has spoken eloquently about his belief in public education. He's a product of public education his whole life. It's very simple. We have to get the federal government out of spending money on bureaucrats and into spending money on kids in Texas. As in so many situations, what has ruined education? The unions and the lawyers. And the mandates that they've put on education, the extra costs that they've done, it's amazing how they've ruined public education. We used to have the best public education system in the country, in the world, but we don't anymore. So what we need to do is bring in more free market solutions, more charter schools, more experimentation, and let's actually think about 21st century ways to educate kids. We still educate kids like they're at a factory with a foreman in front of them. Let's get them on the web. Let's get them online. Let's teach kids and make sure that Texas can be the best, the shining jewel of the United States.
We've got to dramatically shrink the federal government. That includes eliminating unnecessary and unconstitutional cabinet agencies. The very first agency I'd eliminate is the Federal Department of Education. But you know, the biggest reason is not even the cost. The reason is education is far too important for it to be controlled by unelected bureaucrats in Washington. Education should be at the state level, or even better, the local level, where parents can have direct influence on the education of our kids. And you know, I thought Mr. Bognet's answer was very interesting, because what he didn't say is that David Dewhurst would support abolishing the Department of Education. What he argued instead is that he would somehow refine it, or I don't know what, but he wouldn't abolish it. And that is exactly what the moderate establishment says. I think we need serious leadership. We need serious leadership to change the way things are done in Washington, because there are too many people going up there that don't want to rock the boat.
I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but education is not in the book. It belongs to the states. And is, I believe, the only candidate that has actually served on a school board, 15 years, thus the gray hair. I will tell you that the feds have no business in our classrooms. Unleash the 50 states to compete against one another, and good things will happen. Case in point, 2 years ago, Illinois raised its personal income tax 66%, the same thing on their corporate state tax. Guess what happened? Our surrounding states said, hey, bring your business to our state. We won't tax you near as much. Every single legislator in this nation knows that you better have, at the state level, you better have a top-notch education system, or you will not draw industry and commerce to your state. In fact, they will leave. Get out of our way, federal government. We've got smart teachers, smart administrators, and we've got smart kids. Get out of our classrooms.
The Department of Education is 10% of funding for public schools, but 40% of the red tape. And they are the most controlling agency. Teachers are not allowed to teach according to a child's needs or gifts or abilities. They're required to teach according to what the Department of Ed or any number of bureaucrats says. Now, the liberals say they're for individuality as long as you're just like them. That's a problem. Now, if you want to talk about giving money to kids for college and their families for college, 40% of college freshmen have to take remedial classes because the high schools failed them in the first place. So their parents are paying twice to get the same education. No, I don't think the Department of Education is doing a good job. I went to 3 public high schools in 4 years. The Department of Ed has got to go.
Yes, sir.
Education is personal to me. I was raised by a single mom, and I went to public schools that weren't very good. And I was fortunate to work my way out of that. I understand how important education is, and I understand the only reason that I'm sitting up here is because I was fortunate later in life to have a great education, which allowed me to do a lot of things. I want every single one of you to be involved and engaged in public education, with one exception, and that's Washington. Washington needs to be out of it. We need to eliminate the education department, as well as commerce, energy, etc. But we need to bring it down to the local level, where we've got accountability and we can identify governance. Now, I don't talk about it from a theoretical standpoint. I ran a faith-based school. I chaired a faith-based school in one of the lowest income areas of our nation. I understand what you need to do to education. And I'll tell you, I want the federal government out of it, but I want leaders that will stand up and tell you how important education is and how we need to be engaged. And I will always do that because I understand how important education is.
Okay, my turn. This is for Mr. Dewhurst. Now, fair or not, Mr. Dewhurst has been seen as a moderate in Texas politics, and seeing what happened to Richard Lugar this week in Indiana, is this the best time for a moderate from this state to be running for the U.S. Senate?
Mr. Cruz's notion that David Dewhurst is a moderate is about the silliest thing I've ever heard. He has served for the last 12 years in Austin, Texas, and he has put through the Texas miracle. You look at the last 10 years, lower taxes, lower spending, the best economy in the nation, working hand in hand with Rick Perry and the Republicans in Austin. They have passed some amazing conservative bills. The sonogram bill, he's endorsed by all the pro-life groups. He has delivered on pro-life issues. He has delivered on Second Amendment issues. He has delivered on tax cuts. So we have candidates that have spent their careers, weaving rhetoric about other people. But let's look at the record. And by the record, it's very clear. That's why all the business groups have endorsed him across the state. They know he creates jobs. He's a lifelong businessman. He's the only one who served in the military. This canard about what he supposedly is so false, it just makes me laugh a lot.
A couple of weeks ago, all of us, except Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst, were sitting with the Dallas Morning News editorial board, meeting with them. And they asked us, the first three questions they asked number one, is being a moderate a good thing? Number two, they said, don't we need more compromise in Washington? And number three, they said, tell us how you'll be bipartisan and work across the aisle with Democrats. I got to tell you, at that point, I laughed out loud. And I said, listen, if you're looking for an establishment moderate to compromise with the Democrats and increase taxes and spending and grow the debt, I ain't your guy. You've got a perfect choice in this race. Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst, in 15 years in elected office, has done that his entire time. 40% of the committee chairs he's appointed were Democrats. He's raised taxes, he's raised spending, and the Dallas Morning News said, we agree. And that's why they endorsed him. Just today, the Houston Chronicle said the exact same thing. We want a moderate who work across the aisle. David Dewhurst is our guy, and the Houston Chronicle told Dewhurst, don't apologize for being a moderate. Wear that as a badge of honor. I encourage you to read the Chronicle editorial today, praising him for being such a bipartisan moderate.
Okay, this will be a 2-minute answer, and it will be for Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst stand-in, Mr. Bognet. Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst touts his conservative record regarding the Texas budget. It has become increasingly clear that the state budget has been balanced with some cuts, but also by using accounting gimmicks. For example, $2.3 billion deferral for the Foundation School Program, $700 million in tax speed-ups on certain businesses, diverting funds for one purpose and using those to balance the budget, and by deliberate underfunding of Medicaid caseload growth to the tune of $4.8 billion. Mr. Dewhurst has not placed on the table even one solution to the red ink the legislature will face in 2013. I know